Thank you, Mimi. I appreciate that. A little biblical version of the idea of harmony, where this is the 6th week that we're doing a series on harmony. And this week we're looking at the idea of disharmony. I always do a previously on, just so you catch up with where we've got to. The psychological term harmony, because we're not just talking about musical harmony, obviously. The psychological term for harmony is a positive state of inner peace, calmness and balance, as well as the feeling of being in tune with the world, harmony. And we've looked at the idea that we have to do, first of all, obviously in harmony, is to create harmony in our own lives. And to do that, we have to identify with the still point within ourselves. Like a gyroscope, there's a still point, the world is turning. And to experience harmony, we have to experience that still point. And I was saying that's where spiritual practice comes in, coming to the point where we find that still point. You have to get yourself in the game by putting your sails up and catching the spiritual wind. And that's really what you do with spiritual practice. Perceiving that universal harmony. When Einstein was asked what God he believed in, he said he believed in a God who reveals himself in the harmony of all that exists. So that's what we're going for, because the one thing we have to realize is that despite what we witness in the news every day, harmony is the state that the cosmos continues to exist in. Believe it or not, we exist within a state of harmony. If we didn't, everything would be falling apart. The world is ordered, just as the atoms are in order and move in an orderly fashion. The whole of the universe is actually in harmony. And our role is to join with that order, to become part of the harmony that is at the center of all things. In other words, to become part of God. And we looked at how we connect from the harmony in our bodies, because our bodies are in harmony. If they weren't in harmony, we'd be dead. We have to connect from the harmony in our bodies into the harmony that does exist in the present moment. And then use that present moment really as a control panel to make a difference in the world around us. And last week we looked at the idea of connecting with harmony by being aware. The Bible reading we use, when Jesus said, doing what I see the Father doing, in other words, connecting through seeing what the most loving thing to do in any given situation. So that's really where we got up to the idea of connecting with harmony. And if you'd like to look at those or listen to those previous podcasts or on the web, on the red little card in front of you will tell you how to get hold of those podcasts and things. And if you want to be on our mailing list, then the blue card, just fill that in and maybe drop it in the plate or whatever it is. So what do we make with the disharmony that seems to be so prevalent in our world? You just have to turn on the news every single day, and what you witness is that disharmony. We see it in the conflict in the world. We see it in our daily lives as we go about our days. We see it on our television screens. And a lot of the time, I think our experience of life is one of disharmony rather than of harmony. And, the first thing we obviously have to do is we have to begin with ourselves. As I said, in previous weeks, so much of harmony begins and starts with the experience in our minds. And we have to take responsibility for that. And I think if we're going to look at disharmony, we just have to take responsibility for the disharmony that we create that's going on in our minds. We have to acknowledge the contrariness of our thinking and how that contributes to our experience of disharmony. I do come in and have a seat, no problem at all. And there's childcare downstairs if you'd like to take. Do feel free to do that. So I've addressed in previous sessions, I'm not going to go into it again, how we do that. But it begins with meditation, mindfulness, awareness of pausing before we act. being aware of the fruitlessness of worrying about a past that we cannot affect and a future that is not here. That we worry about all that stuff, or being concerned about what others think about us, or trying to control a world that is fundamentally not controllable. And we have to address all of this if we have to deal with the disharmony in our lives. That's a sort of given. And spiritual practice is the place where we do that. And as I say, we have covered that. So I know it's a big one, but if you can take it as a given that you've created an experience of harmony in your life, you may not have done, but I mean, if we start from that particular point, the question then is, how do we deal with the disharmony that exists in the world today? I think the first thing we have to say about it, is what we see as being disharmony might actually be harmony. I'm not going to get out of it, but I think a lot of what we see as disharmony could be harmonious. I mean, do you describe a lion bringing down a gazelle as disharmony? I mean, there is fear, there is violence, there is death. But is it disharmony? Probably not. In Isaiah, the Bible does go in for this idealized future. The wolf will live with the lamb. The leopard will lie down with the goat. The calf and the lion and the yearling will be together. And the little child will lead them. The cow will feed with the bear. Their young will lie down together. And the lion will eat straw with the ox. The infant will play near the cobra's den. And the young child will put its hand into the viper's nest. They will neither harm nor destroy. Unrealistic, I think. That's the Old Testament's view of an idealized, fabricated reality of what the possible idea of harmony is. And I think for the 21st century, it doesn't really cut much mustard, quite frankly. Nor does the New Testament. The New Testament's idea of harmony, Revelation. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and the sea was no more. And I saw a holy city, a new Jerusalem, coming down from heaven, from God, prepared as a bride adorned by her husband. This is the idea of the second coming being Jesus coming down on a cloud, all that sort of stuff. And I heard a loud voice saying, "See, the home of God is among mortals. Death will be no more." I mean, I'm afraid to say I think both are pretty far-fetched. And I don't think they really help when we're looking at the nature of harmony. The Old Testament saying that people, things, animals will change their ways in order to be harmonious. And the New Testament saying that death will end. I'm not sure how helpful either of that is in the 21st century. But I think, I think it is possible that events that we view as being disharmony are actual part of a harmonious order. That idea of nature red in tooth and claw. I mean, there is a harmony in that, whether you like it or not. There's a harmony in earthquakes. What's happening is the earth is settling. There's a harmony within that. Even weather events, they're all nature trying to express a harmony that exists in all. But because we think of these events as being violent in some way, we see them as disharmonious. So if you discount all of that, and I think one can, we're still left with the chaos that the human race seems to inflict and the obvious disharmony that creates. I say obvious disharmony, but of course, deep down, there is a harmony that will prevail. If we continue to upset the Earth's balance by our carbon emissions or whatever, then harmony will be restored by the planet becoming uninhabitable for humans, and it will all begin again. I mean, you can see how that harmony, will come about. You can do that when the planet is billions of years old, and we've only been around for a few thousand years. I mean, I looked it up. Humans have been around for 300,000 years. It's not very long. You can reset. You can just unplug and reset. We think, no, we're here. But no, it is possible. And you could also say that wars and tyrants are like forest fires that keep the numbers down, and that every civilization will rise and fall as they've always done. But I don't think that's particularly helpful either if you're living through all that stuff. Humans have one unique perspective above all other species, and that is the ability we have to self-reflect. That's the one thing that we have that no other species has, is the ability to self-reflect. The lion does not self-reflect when it brings down the gazelle. All it thinks is lunch. And that's it. Volcanoes don't self-reflect. Neither do viruses when they cause pandemics and wipe out millions of people. But we do. We are conscious and aware of what we are doing and also what others are doing. We're conscious and can self-reflect because we have evolved over time. That's been our evolution. We have become that part of the universe that is conscious of itself. I've been through this many times. We had those carbon atoms, Big Bang, all those carbon atoms, and now those carbon atoms have come together through evolution to make us, and we're the universe made conscious of itself. And that consciousness, which was latent for 13.7 billion years, manifested in humanity 300,000 years ago. Not long in the scheme of things. And over those 300,000 years, humanity has been trying to survive itself, seeing other parts of humanity as a threat and feeling the need to attack them. As do animals. Lions, dogs, even gazelles, all compete with their own species to mate for food and for survival. Our competitiveness is just an aspect of animal behavior that we continue to exhibit. And because we're so young as a species, and because we're only just getting used to our ability to think and to self-respect and to plan our survival, we've not yet dropped that survival instinct for more productive realization. We haven't dropped that, and we haven't taken up the idea for more productive realization of our own interdependence. That's not something that we've taken on in a big way as humanity. But that realization of our own interdependence is latent within us. Because, as I said before, the next stage of evolution is not an extra long thumb for better texting, but an evolution of consciousness. That is the next stage of evolution. We're in that place where, in fact, I always think that all stages of evolution are about the evolution of consciousness. When we pulled ourselves out of the water, it was because we became conscious of the light and everything out of the water. So everything is, in fact, about the evolution of consciousness. And our physicality has been driven by the evolution of consciousness, the things we've become conscious of. And the next stage of evolution, again, is an evolution into the consciousness. This is what I think the next stage of evolution is. It's an evolution into the consciousness that realizes that we're all from the same source, that we're all part of the same consciousness, that we're all expressions of the same whole, the same consciousness as expressed by you and me and everybody else and everything else. That realization is the next step. And it is already here among us. It's here among us. Many people have experienced that. And it's here in many other communities. But it has not yet entered a herd mentality as an objective reality. And so the herd continues to fight amongst itself as if one part needed to suppress the other for its own survival, which is an illusion. But it continues to happen. This illusion is humans expressing themselves as animals. Whereas in reality, we are animals now expressing ourselves in a new way as humanity. a conscious, self-reflecting being that is able to experience and understand the source that brought it into being in the first place. Now, that is quite a big shift. That is what makes us human. Our ability to self-reflect and our ability to know the source that brought us into being in the first place. We've been striving at it for centuries with religions and all that sort of stuff. And all that sort of stuff is we realize that there's something within us. We realize that there is a source within us. And each culture comes up with its own description of what that source within us is. Religion is really a cultural interpretation of the same experience. We're just trying to put a name on that realization that we have, that is something within us, deep within us, that brings us into being. And so, for humanity to go forward, it has to take responsibility. And I think this is absolutely, for humanity to go forward, it has to take responsibility for the disharmony that it creates. It has to drop the animal survival mentality and manage the amazing resources at its disposal in order to create harmony. Or shall I say, to bring humanity back into the harmony that brought it into being in the first place. To bring humanity back into the harmony that brought it into being in the first place. All the disharmony we see on our screens is a function of backward, animalistic thinking that puts me and mine above everything else. The new thinking is more focused on us and ours rather than me and mine. What we're witnessing in the world is the death throes of an old way of being that goes back to a survivalist animal mentality. Humanity is able to shed that mentality like the skin of a snake. The only question is whether or not humanity can shed that skin fast enough before it throws itself lemming-like into its own destruction. That's what we're up against. That's the race, whether or not this can happen before we destroy ourselves. I mean, you can see it. And I think that's where we come in. Our job is to have the new consciousness become dominant before the old consciousness brings about an harmonious destruction of itself. Wars, mass migration, mass extinction are harmonious in terms of many millennia. They are not harmonious in terms of us today, and we should recognize the disharmony that they are an expression of. So, obviously, what can we do? How can we bring humanity to its senses, end war, and see the sharing of resources so that all humanity in the planet are cared for and looked after? Now, that may sound an impossible dream, but it sure is a great question. How can we bring humanity to its senses, end war, and see the sharing of resources so that all of humanity in the planet are cared for and looked after? So, how do we do that? Well, the first thing to do, I think, is we have to seriously ask that question. Because to seriously ask the question is to begin to live into the question. How do we do that? To live into the question is to begin to address it. The way you don't live into the question is saying, oh, it's all a pipe dream. It's all not possible. You know, world peace is only something that models express at the Miss World thing, you know. The rest of us know what the reality is. Let's just carry on fighting each other and just make sure we win. That's what peace is about nowadays. Let's just make sure we win. Then we'll have peace. It's never going to happen. No, we have to really seriously ask that question. How can we bring humanity to its senses? And that's the first bit. How do we bring humanity to its senses? So that we can end war and see the sharing of resources so that all humanity and the planet are cared for and looked after. And I do have a few answers. My main answer is going to be next week, but I do have a few answers for this week. So for me, the solution comes down to 4 things. 1, getting people to ask that question seriously. Really to engage with it. How do we do it? What's the plan? And come up with a plan. Secondly, I think we have to develop an understanding of unity of consciousness and the interconnectedness of all things. I think that's key. We have to develop an understanding of unity of consciousness and the interconnectedness of all things. People think everything's separate. People think they can just get on with it. As long as they're okay, it's going to be okay. Let's just make it. No, it's complete rubbish. China's problems are our problems. I mean, until you see that, we're never going to solve it. If that understanding, the understanding of unity of consciousness and the interconnectedness of all things, if that became more prevalent, it will spread through social media and the global consciousness that's developed over the last century. And that is happening. I went and saw Santana last week at Red Rocks. And funny enough, Santana at Red Rocks, right? His was the Oneness Tour. I mean, Santana, and he did all this stuff. He played everything. You'd be so jealous. Black magic work. He played the lot. And then he got up and he gave a 5-minute talk on this subject. He said, we've got to have a new Woodstock for the world. And he really, he gave a 5-minute talk about the nature of oneness. And then he got on with the music again. It is out there in the consciousness. It is out there. We have to see the work that we do here on ourselves as part of the evolution of consciousness. And the imperative to have a more peaceful, harmonious world will come through an understanding that we and thousands of others are working on, including Carlos Santana. We are working on that. And so many people, Deepak, everybody around, they are all from the same. Marianne Williamson, not to be political. They are all coming from that perspective. In different countries, there are loads of people into meditation, mystical reality. They're all working. And through, global consciousness and social media, it is becoming more out. We're not alone in the work that we do here. It's happening everywhere. And the sooner we join up with others and work, the better. And again, the third thing I want to suggest, and this is not political, vote. Now, it may seem a political statement, but it's not. Believe it or not, democracy is part of the evolution of consciousness. I mean, it's obvious. It's part of the evolution of consciousness that began 300,000 years ago. Democracy arrived in Greece 2,500 years ago. That's when it arrived. And at that point, with democracy, humanity realized that the will of the people, the collective will of the collective people, brings advances to civilization. Better than a tyrant. The abolition of slavery, racial equality, human rights, they've all come through the democratic process. And it is through the democratic process that more harmony will come about. Yes, people do vote for tyrants, but progress is not that way. We've seen the ethics of the world develop through democracy. We've been looking for leaders. We should be looking for leaders who will advance the care and harmony of humanity, and we should vote for them. All around the world, we should be looking for those leaders and advancing them, say, yes, this is the way forward. And that's something that can happen right the way around the world. Einstein said that no problem can be solved from the same level of consciousness that created it. And to solve the problems of the world today, we have to change our consciousness from that of self-interested nations to a global awareness of the inheritance that we've been given, our home, our earth, our planet. That's our inheritance. We have to become part of a shift in consciousness that breaks the current thinking being the rush to safety, the ghettoization of thought, and the choosing of strong men and women who will protect us at the expense of others. The need to spend money on defense rather than on the poor. What we're doing here is part of that shift in consciousness, as is what you do in your life. And it's been coming really since the first axial age, the emergence of Buddha, Jesus, Lao Tzu, Muhammad, where they took responsibility for their own experience and communicated it. And we're now in a second axial age, the rise of unity of consciousness, the rise of global consciousness, and the rise of an understanding of the unified nature of the universe. And for all this to happen, we have to continue to work on ourselves, to be the best we can, and to raise up those who we see as being the best that they can, to support them, because this will eventually happen all around the world. It has to happen around the world for us to survive. There has to be this realization. Cooperation is the future. There's one question to ask, the question that will solve all the problems in the world. And that question is, how can I help? That's the direction we need to go in. Because people will see then that the only way forward is one of cooperation, mutual support, and harmony. It's either that or blowing ourselves up to smithereens. I looked up the word smithereens, by the way. It means a small broken piece. When you blow yourself to smithereens, you're blowing yourself up to small broken pieces. And right now, we are all small, unbroken pieces. And our job is to come together to form a beautiful whole that is yet to be imagined. We have to form, it's not imagined in the Old Testament. Lions are not going to eat straw, I can tell you that right now. And death is not going to be over. I'm going to tell you that right now. We have to come up with a beautiful whole that's yet to be imagined. And what that might be, I'm going to talk about next week. Guys. So listen, we always want to give you an opportunity to come back at Heather and I about anything you disagree with, anyone want to share anything. The microphone's available. We don't have to say anything. Yes, Flip, over here, please. That's great. Thank you, Flip.
I can't believe you enriched me the way you did today, because I was with these kind of goofball friends of mine, and we were having a beer, and we were having little teeny micro arguments, about all these little things going on in the world. And one of the guys, who's pretty much the goofiest, said, "Why does everybody have to be right? What is wrong with the world? Everybody has to be right. We're like really good fishing friends. And even in our little group, everybody wants to be right. And everybody can't be right. And it's like everybody wants to win, like you were saying. And it's just like, you just have to sit down sometimes and say, hey, I may not be right. I don't have all the answers." And it's actually a release when you come to that conclusion. And I've been thinking about that for 3 days, and I called him and I said, I can't believe that was so insightful. It was just a teeny little question, but it was so cool.
Flip, thank you. Absolutely perfect. Thank you. Yes.
I'm Julia, and I'm Carolyn's sister. And I am really grateful for the conversation you had today. And I'd like to actually take it a step further. Assuming that we're all consciousness, so is the air, the earth, the water elements. One of the great studies that has been out there, which I think you've probably talked about, is the Japanese scientist Emoto. And he took water as an example, for instance, in Japan, that had been radiated. He put it underneath the microscope, and you could see the crystalline structure of this was really quite disastrous looking. So then he had a group of people praying over the water, and he took the same water, put it under the microscope, and it was just beautiful. So then he started doing the same sort of experiment by people even putting on their water bottle the word love, or peace, or harmony, and he could see exactly how it changed. So one of your comments at the very beginning was storms and how, kind of storms are, doing their own thing. I would actually say that storms are a reflection of our consciousness going out into the world. So if we're about hate and fear and doubt and all these other things, it gets absorbed into our land, our earth, the air, the water. And so to me, it comes back to us, to be able to be extremely conscious of what we look at, what we say, what the music we hear, and to make sure that we are sending this purity out. And this morning, there was a story about an upcoming hurricane in Florida. So to me, what's the answer to that is that we start visioning what we want. We want the outcome. And I hope that maybe that's something you talk about next week. But really, it's not the negatives, it's how we want to see the world, and praying, envisioning this. So it's not the Florida filled with floods and roofs flowing, but it's purity and peace and dissipating that fear and whatever is out in the atmosphere. So,
Julia, thank you for responding in an absolutely lovely way. I really appreciate that. That's absolutely perfect. Thank you. Anybody else? Yes, Eric.
Yes, in terms of coming back to you, I couldn't disagree more about animals being or lacking the ability to be reflective. I've spent a lot of time with dogs, horses, and other animals, and they can be trained. Why? Because they're reflective.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I couldn't agree with you more about democracy and that being the logical development of consciousness and how it's so important in our world today to work towards working together to solve our problems rather than giving up and giving power to tyrants.
Yeah. You can see how much I know about animals by my trying to make a point. But yeah, thank you very much. That's absolutely lovely. Anybody else like to say anything? Always good to be put right.
Question?
Yes, of course. I'm going to give you the microphone because they can't hear. Otherwise, yeah.
It sounds like you're assuming that the expanding and dynamic nature of the universe is harmonious.
Yeah, I think I would go with that, yes. I think I would go with that, yeah. I have a basic, experience that there is a fundamental harmony in the universe, yeah. Yeah.